Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's me, Jermaine. You know what? I'm ready to wrestle. I got my tank top on, just came from the weights, from the gym, and I'm ready to tear my opponent down. So, my question to you is, are you ready to take down your opponent? It's wrestling time. So put on the proper clothing and let's wrestle. Today, our message comes from the ultimate wrestler, Jacob, from the book of Genesis. You've heard of Jacob. Genesis chapter 32, verse 22 through 32. And it reads thus so. That night Jacob got up, and he took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of the Jabbok. After he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until daybreak. When that man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip, so that his hip was wretched as he wrestled, injured as he wrestled with the man. The man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." The man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he said. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with humans and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God's face, and yet my life was spared." Let me give you a little bit of context of what's going on. As you know the story of Jacob and Esau, 2 of these men had an offering to which they gave unto the Lord. But one offering was done purely out of limitation, and one offering was given from Jacob from the abundance of his heart unto God. God honored it so much so that Jacob was the blessed one, the favored one in the sight of God. Now, because of this favor, there has always been tension between Esau and Jacob. Esau has always been envious and jealous of his brother Jacob as a result of this favor that he has as a result of God. So much so that it has created rivalry in the family. This rivalry has become so destructive now. Esau wants to war against his brother Jacob. And Jacob himself is fearful. He is afraid of 400 men that Esau has that is coming to destroy Jacob. Jacob is so afraid that he divides his camp into 2 parties, one that will face the men and the other that will be set apart to escape should the first division suffer loss. Now let's talk about this wrestling match. Wrestling as a sport is a very aggressive sport. So here we have Jacob wrestling with all of this stuff in his mind. He's in fear of his brother, the 400 men. He wants to defend his camp. his family, his servants. And here he has encountered what the Bible calls as an angel, and then some others have interpreted as being the very God himself. Jacob is wrestling with God with all that is going on. So wrestling in itself, it's a very aggressive sport. To wrestle means to take part in a fight either as a sport or in earnest. It involves grappling with one's opponent and trying to throw or force them to the ground, to pin them. The object is to overthrow your opponent and to pin them down, to conquer and subdue your opponent. What is it that you're wrestling with on today? You know, many think that wrestling is a mere object of physical force and strength. However, that is only partly true. You see, wrestling involves strategy. So I'm going to give you a few points to help you strategize so that you may win against your opponent. Number one, you must first understand your opponent. Define your opponent. What is your opponent's strength? What is it that they have against you? What is your opponent's weaknesses? Have you studied your opponent's matches with other individuals, with other wrestlers? Exploit their weaknesses. Point number two. We learn from Jacob's story that his opponent did not have enough physical strength and strategy to pin down Jacob. Why? Point three. Jacob refused to give up. A wrestler will tell you that many losers are defeated as a result of their mindset. You see, wrestling is it's a tough sport. It's a sport of endurance. It's sweaty. It's musty. It's hard. It's trying. It's uncomfortable and rather annoying. So Jacob can't pin his opponent down either, and neither can his opponent pin him down. So this opponent of his, right? This opponent that is represented as God says, you know what? I'm going to take a cheap shot against Jacob. Has anyone ever taken a cheap shot against you? Now, you know in wrestling that this is a strategy of the opponent. Yes, it is quite frankly cheating, because you can't get to your opponent by the means of overcoming them with strategy, with physical force, nor can they take you down. So what? They have to take a cheap shot against you. So what does God do? God ends up injuring Jacob's hip. But Jacob is relentless. Even though he has taken that cheap shot, and even though he is struggling harder than ever before, Jacob refuses still to go down. So much to the point that God says, get up off me. Let me go. It's daybreak. How long are you going to stay in this wrestling match? Wow. Jacob with the hip. God is now telling Jacob to let him go. And Jacob says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Point number 4, the last point, win. There is nothing like winning. No one wants to lose. Do you want to lose? Hell no. So let's win. And winning, know this, winning is not always what you think. Yeah, in the game of wrestling, it is to pin your opponent down, right? But in this particular situation, Jacob's opponent, who was God, is very strong. And he's a strategizer. And in some cases, he even takes cheap shots. But what are you going to do to overcome all of that? And it's to win. So the winning in this match is not being taken down. And I don't care if you get hit, kicked, bruised, you come out limping. Don't give up. So keep fighting. Keep hanging in there. Don't let your opponent pin you down. And I don't care if you are tired and if you're exhausted. I want you to remain persistent in the faith. Let me tell you how persistent Jacob was. Let me tell you what Jacob told God when he was fearful of those 400 men coming to destroy him by his brother's hand. He said to God, his opponent, I remember the words you told me, says Jacob, that I will surely do you good and make your offering as the sand of the sea and cannot be counted because of their number. Jacob had faith. He had faith in himself. He had faith in God. And he had faith in God's promise. You know what? I think it was every intention to take Jacob down. Perhaps God wanted to try this Jacob to see if he really was man enough. And if you're a woman, are you woman enough? Perhaps God's thoughts against Jacob was, does he really want to win? Perhaps Jacob is a coward. Perhaps he's a loser. Look at Jacob. He's so afraid of his brother Esau, his arch enemy, who is coming to attack him. Perhaps Jacob doesn't have faith in me. Look at him. He's so anxious. He'll do anything. Does Jacob really have what it takes to get this promise that I made to him? Does Jacob have strength? Jacob did have strength. And he remained steadfast and unable to be pinned down. He rested on God's promise. And so he got the blessing. So in your match, I want you to tell God, who you're wrestling with, that you will not take me down until I get every single blessing and every single promise that you made unto me. And I'm going to stay in here. You could take down a hip. You could take down a breast. You could take down a limb. But I'm going to stay in this fight, and I refuse to let you pin me down. Oh, we're going to wrestle this thing out. And guess what? I'm going to get my blessing. So man of God, so woman of God, will you survive? You see, Jacob got that new name Israel, meaning he has survived with man and God. Will you get the new name Israel? Will you survive this wrestling match to get a new name? Will you overcome God with your faith to stay in this match? Will you get that blessing? We shall see. I'm rooting for you. You may come out limping, but by all means, and by any means necessary, don't let God, your opponent, take you down. Get your blessing.